The whiskey bottle tumbled from my grip and smashed against the kitchen floor. I had flown across 12 hours just to surprise her at the beach house. Girls' getaway, she had told me. Only her and a couple of friends. I had pictured her expression when I stepped through the door. I had sealed a huge contract, locked in a partnership that would secure our future forever. I wanted to share the triumph with the woman I had sworn eternity to. Instead, I overheard my wife plotting my end. If he disappeared, the insurance payout would wipe out my debts, she told her friend. $2 million. Plus his brother has always caught my eye. I could finally be with someone who truly sparks something in me. Her friend chuckled as though it were harmless banter. It was not harmless. My name is Vincent. I am 39. In that instant, everything crystallized with brutal sharpness. My wife was not kidding. She was scheming. I abandoned the spilled whiskey and slipped back to my rental car. My fingers stayed calm on the wheel as I headed for the airport. My thoughts were already plotting several steps forward. Not revenge, not yet, but survival. Figuring out the signs I had ignored. Assembling evidence without ever admitting I had eavesdropped on her lethal daydreams. By 4 a.m, I boarded a plane bound for Costa Rica. By midday, I had vanished. Back at the beach house, my wife was likely still asleep, oblivious that I had caught every syllable. Oblivious that I had ceased being her spouse and transformed into something far more lethal, a shadow carrying a strategy. I leased a modest villa in San Jose using an alias and began recording every detail. Operating from Costa Rica, I retained a private detective to track my wife's exchanges. The life insurance she had referenced, I required duplicates. The brother she had mentioned, I needed to gauge the depth of their link. Every call, every payment, every action hinting at forethought. The detective delivered the initial summary in under 3 days. My wife had quietly raised my life insurance coverage 6 months earlier. She had doubled the benefit amount, named herself the exclusive recipient. She had handled it discreetly, stashing the documents in a drawer I seldom opened. 6 months proved this was no spur-of-the-moment impulse. This was deliberate. I also obtained audio of telephone talks between my wife and her confidant. They were debating approaches. Toxins. A staged mishap. Something unlikely to raise red flags. They giggled as they mapped it out. My wife had been browsing websites about insurance claim procedures. She had searched average durations of inquiries. She had even scrolled through my brother's online profiles to confirm his relationship status. She was constructing her next chapter atop my grave. I shifted half my available funds into an international account. Not to conceal them. I was not fleeing authorities, but to safeguard them from a woman who had already resolved to kill me for profit. Next, I phoned my brother. Stay out of touch for a bit, I instructed him, and never be alone with my wife. Why? What is going on? Simply believe me. I will clarify it all shortly. I ended the call before he could press further. By the 5th day in Costa Rica, I possessed sufficient material to ruin her. Now the only question was the method. On the 8th day, I submitted the initial anonymous report to law enforcement. A worried observer describing troubling dialogue overheard at a coastal residence. A female discussing potential harm to her spouse. Insurance deception. Intentional plotting. Everything backed by records. Everything plausibly deniable. After all, I was merely relaying details I had accidentally overheard prior to vanishing. The inquiry unfolded discreetly. My wife remained unaware at first. She stayed at our home, likely puzzled by my absence, likely anxious that her scheme had derailed. By then she had probably contacted authorities herself, filing a missing person report, performing the anxious partner role flawlessly. From Costa Rica, I observed her reality begin to crumble. Officers showed up at the residence with inquiries. They had received alerts regarding alarming discussions. They sought to question her regarding the insurance adjustments. They requested access to her call logs. They wanted clarity on the chronology. Naturally, she rejected all accusations, dismissed it as a mix-up, claimed it had been light-hearted jesting, insisted her friend had overstated things, accused me of being suspicious and domineering, the standard maneuver of someone trapped by their own words. Yet authorities require only probable cause to proceed, not certainty, and I had supplied plenty of that. My brother tried reaching me 3 times. I ignored each attempt. On the 4th, he realized I was alive and intentionally avoiding contact. He left a message, "Your wife is losing it. The cops suspect she plotted to murder you." What in the world is happening? Everything, I thought. Everything is unfolding precisely as it should. I monitored the emerging news stories. Local woman probed for insurance fraud and murder conspiracy. Her photographs splashed across reports. Her professional life disintegrating live. She had aimed to erase me. Instead, I had erased her. Her sister rang on the 14th day. I nearly let it go to voicemail. But an impulse led me to answer and hear her tearful plea about the family unraveling. About my wife's emotional collapse. About how authorities had uncovered no solid proof, yet the mere doubt had wrecked everything. Where are you hiding? Her sister pressed. Why not return and resolve this? Resolve what? I replied evenly. Your sister's scheme to kill me? A hush fell. She intended to murder me, I went on. She confided in her friend about the insurance proceeds. About pursuing my brother. She had already boosted my coverage and begun studying execution techniques. That is not a simple misunderstanding. That is calculated homicide. Her sister wept more intensely. She is experiencing a total meltdown. She is committed to a mental health facility. She repeats that she regrets it, that she never meant it, that it was merely venting frustration. Normal people do not casually vent about assassinating their husbands, I stated. They scheme it. She schemed it. I disconnected. Yet hearing her sister's tone stirred something within me. Not pity. I no longer possessed that capacity. But acknowledgement that I had unleashed a chain of events beyond reversal. My wife resided in a psychiatric ward. Her livelihood had collapsed. Her relatives were shattered. And there I sat in a Costa Rican villa, witnessing the disintegration from afar. Eventually, the authorities terminated the probe. Lack of sufficient proof. My wife's attorney had performed skillfully. She had recast the entire affair as psychological turmoil, as a plea for assistance masked in morbid humor. She had presented specialists to speak on her client's emotional condition. Prison was avoided, but she would carry for the remainder of her existence the awareness that I had wounded her deeply, that I had discovered the truth, that I had elected to demolish her instead of confronting her directly, and that realization served as its own incarceration. I flew back to the United States on day 21. Not for reconciliation, not to confront my wife, but to retrieve my existence from the ruins I had helped create. The residence belonged to me. The finances belonged to me. The path ahead belonged to me. She resided in her parents' lower level, heavily sedated and shattered. My brother visited the day following my return. He gazed at me filled with bewilderment and uncertainty. She intended to end your life, he remarked. It was not a query. Correct. And you simply departed? Rather than alerting authorities immediately, I desired her to experience the agony she had intended for me. I answered softly. I wanted her to grasp the sensation of having your existence stolen. He studied me for an extended pause. You are no longer the man I believed you to be. Correct, I conceded. I am not. The dissolution of marriage concluded swiftly. She contested nothing, merely endorsed the documents from her parents' residence and withdrew deeper into isolation. I retained the property, the funds, all of it. She received a modest allocation along with the weight of realizing she had attempted my murder and I had retaliated by annihilating her in response. I began sessions with a counselor. Not seeking atonement. I was not foolish enough to believe that remained attainable, but to comprehend my decision to pursue methodical ruin over straightforward departure. Why I had engineered her collapse rather than simply walking away. You needed her to comprehend, my counselor observed. You needed her to endure the same shock you felt upon hearing her plot your demise. She spoke accurately. I had redirected her own instrument against her and labeled it fairness. Yet fairness demands the individual grasps their actions. My former wife grasped them. She grasped them completely. And that comprehension had propelled her into a mental institution where she passed her hours gazing blankly, numbed by medication. I had prevailed. Yet the triumph carried the flavor of venom. 6 months following the separation, my ex-wife made another attempt to end her life. This time she succeeded. Her sister informed me. My ex-wife had ingested tablets at her parents' residence. She left a message behind. By discovery, it was far too late. Initially, I registered no sensation, merely an emptiness where feeling ought to reside. Then the burden arrived, not grief, but comprehension. I had engineered her obliteration so thoroughly that she opted for oblivion rather than enduring the consequences of my actions. I had craved her suffering. I had delivered it with ruthless precision. And now she was gone. The message, her sister explained, had been directed to me. She had expressed understanding of my motives, acceptance that she merited it, inability to persist knowing the man she had transformed into someone who could execute such mercilessness. I absorbed those lines and felt an irreparable fracture form within. At her service, I positioned myself at the rear, observing her relatives mourn. Her parents appeared utterly devastated, not solely by her passing, but by awareness of her intentions. Her brother refused eye contact. All present recognized that I had initiated the sequence, that I had meticulously planned and flawlessly carried out her downfall. My counselor inquired about my emotions. As though I had turned into the monster I sought to flee, I replied, as though I had killed her, merely gradually, without violence. She offered no contradiction. I realized then that vengeance persists long after the target collapses. It reverberates onward, ravaging not merely the intended victim, but every person tied to them. It corrodes the avenger above all, rendering them vacant, able to observe agony and deem it equitable. I had yearned for my wife to fathom the depth of her treachery. Instead, I had become a killer, merely one shielded by legality. 1 year after my ex-wife's passing, I disposed of the residence. I could no longer inhabit it. Each space echoed the memory of who I had been prior to those words at the beach house. Every inch recalled my preference for ruin over integrity, that I had orchestrated a woman's gradual slide into despair and termed it responsibility. I relocated to a modest downtown unit. Minimalist. Bare. A space permitting existence unburdened by the gravity of my decisions. My brother ceased communication. Her parents filed a wrongful death claim, alleging I had propelled their daughter towards self-destruction via psychological mistreatment and forethought. The suit was rejected. I had committed no clear illegality. Yet the ruling held no significance. I understood my role. I began assisting at a suicide crisis line, not for absolution, out of urgent desire to stop others from transforming into what I had become, someone able to witness another's decline and derive satisfaction from it. The role tormented me beyond description. Every distressed voice, every individual teetering on the brink mirrored my ex-wife. Each seemed like someone I had personally forced toward that edge. Her parents forwarded a letter. They had preserved her final message, the one intended for me. They wished me to confront her concluding thoughts, not as condemnation, but as evidence. Within it she stated, I now see the reason behind your actions. I earned it. Yet I cannot continue existing aware that the man I vowed my life to has turned into someone capable of such brutality. I cannot continue existing aware that I shaped you into this. Therefore I depart. I apologize. For it all. Those sentences shattered me more profoundly than any act of retribution ever could. For in her conclusion, she had perceived that we had both perished in a conflict neither triumphed in, and I remained the solitary survivor amid the debris. 3 years following my ex-wife's death, I sat in my counselor's office and at last voiced the question I had evaded. Is recovery possible for me? She paused before responding, merely regarded me with the gaze of someone who had witnessed countless fractured souls attempting reconstruction. It hinges, she replied, on whether you seek pardon or insight. I no longer distinguished between them. I had devoted 3 years to suicide prevention efforts. I had fielded pleas from those perched on precipices, guided them back, absorbed their anguish without condemnation. I had promoted mental wellness initiatives. I had contributed proceeds from the residence sale to organizations combating self-harm. Yet none restored her. None undid the reality that I had masterminded her ruin and branded it fairness. I had overheard my wife devising my murder and countered by murdering her methodically, erasing her profession, her standing, her sanity, her desire to persist. I had performed it with surgical exactness, and I had defended it as reckoning. Yet reckoning necessitates survival, learning, reconstruction. My course had eradicated every chance of those outcomes. I had morphed into precisely what I had aimed to evade, a being capable of terminating another's existence and deeming it warranted. The bitter twist lay in her final message proving accurate. I had become unrecognizable, a figure cloaked in savagery, yet claiming righteousness. Someone who had mistaken vengeance for virtue. I would never fully mend from my actions. I could merely dedicate whatever remained of my days to halting others from repeating my error. That would need to suffice, because it represented precisely what I had earned.